The bar wasn't loud, not the kind of place that drew attention or noise. It sat off a dusty road near the Nevada border, a stopover for oil workers, retired cops and the kind of drifters who carried their past like steel under their ribs. Jason sat in the far corner, black shirt, sleeves rolled. One glass of water, untouched. He wasn't drinking, he wasn't meeting anyone. He was just waiting, watching, until the laughter started, not the casual kind, the ugly kind. At the other end of the room, near the jukebox, a tall guy in fight shorts and a sleeveless hoodie leaned over a younger man. The boy, maybe 17, no older, sat hunched on the bar stool, trying not to flinch. The fighter slapped the table again and kept going. It wasn't just teasing. He was taunting, calling him soft, saying real fighters didn't wear glasses, that anyone who couldn't take a punch shouldn't be near a mat. The boy said nothing, just kept staring down at his empty soda glass like it could shield him. Jason turned his head slowly. The fighter's voice got louder. He pulled the boy's chair back and stepped closer, pushing the kid in the shoulder just enough to rattle him. That's when Jason stood up. He didn't rush. He didn't say a word. He walked across the room, slow and deliberate, like time owed him space. The fighter saw him coming and laughed, called out before Jason even reached him, said maybe Grandpa wanted to buy the kid a helmet. Jason didn't answer. He stopped about 6 feet away, hands relaxed, shoulders down, but the air had changed. People at the nearby tables felt it first, a drop in sound, a vacuum of tension that pulled everyone in without warning. The fighter straightened up, smirked. He said something about movies. Jason didn't blink. Instead, he said that when a man picks someone half his size to dominate, he's not showing power, he's revealing a deficit. The smirk cracked. Jason stepped closer. Still no fists, no bark, just presence. He told the fighter to step back. Told him he had 5 seconds to decide whether he wanted to keep pretending or learn what stillness really felt like. The boy on the stool looked up, startled. His eyes darted between them, first fear, then something else, not confusion, regret. Jason didn't notice it yet, because his focus was locked on the fighter's breathing, the shift in posture, the twitch in the left thumb, the adrenaline he could smell coming off the man like oil on steel. The fighter didn't back down. He laughed again, said Jason was old, all movie talk, no fight left. Jason took another step, said one more word, something flat, final, like gravel dragged over concrete. The bartender shouted for them to take it outside, but no one moved, because it felt like one more word might rip the floor open. And then the boy spoke, low, cracked, fast. He said the man wasn't a bully, said he was his brother, said he wasn't being picked on, he was being trained. Jason paused, didn't step back, didn't process it fully yet. He just stared at the kid, measuring the tone, the panic, the honesty. And that's when the fighter dropped his stance. All the bark melted off his face. He turned to the boy and asked if he was okay. The boy nodded quickly, said it again, he was fine. They did this all the time. Jason exhaled slowly. Something inside his shoulders shifted. He looked down, then back up, and realized he might have just threatened the wrong man. 10 minutes later, the bar had settled. The fighter and the boy moved to a different table. Jason sat back in the corner, still silent, still watching. But now his eyes were on the past, because he'd seen something in the kid's face that didn't match the script he was ready to play. Something real, something he missed. Have you ever stepped into a situation to protect someone, only to realize you misunderstood everything? Drop your story in the comments. Sometimes our instincts are right, but our timing is off. The fighter approached the table without aggression. No squared shoulders, no flexed arms, just quiet footsteps and an unreadable look. Jason didn't stand, didn't shift. He simply set his glass down, placed both hands on the table, and waited. The fighter reached the edge of the booth and paused. He said one name, soft, quiet, intentional. A name Jason hadn't heard in almost 20 years. Jason didn't react outwardly, but something inside his chest pulled tight. He repeated the name back, slower, like testing for a memory. The fighter nodded, said that was their father. The room around them kept moving. Pool balls cracked in the corner. A waitress poured coffee. But inside that booth, time had stalled. Jason leaned back slightly. His eyes studied the fighter's face. And now, for the first time, he saw it. Not the ego, not the surface, but the echo of someone he used to train beside, a man who saved Jason's life on a rooftop in Basra and disappeared into the wind a year later. Jason asked how long ago he passed. The fighter said it had been 3 years, said the boy Jason stepped in to protect was his father's grandson. Jason sat with that, didn't speak. Just breathed in the fact that he'd nearly put hands on the last living son of a man who once pulled him from gunfire without hesitation. The fighter didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He said he understood why Jason stepped in, said it looked bad. But what Jason didn't know was that the boy had been picked on at school for months, that his confidence was cracked, his stance was weak, and he wanted to fight but didn't know how to take hits. So the older brother, ex-MMA, semi-pro, now working construction, took him out once a week to pressure him, not to hurt him, to prepare him. Jason glanced toward the kid, now playing with a toothpick and sipping root beer at the back table. He looked calm, not afraid. Jason asked why he didn't say something sooner. The fighter smiled, said their dad always taught them. You don't explain your discipline to strangers. Jason nodded once. The words hit, because they felt like something his own mentor once told him, long before cameras, long before scripts. The fighter reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded photo, slid it across the table. Jason hesitated, then opened it. 4 men stood on a dusty hill, shirtless, grinning. One of them was Jason, younger, raw. Another was the fighter's father. They were drenched in sweat, arms over each other's shoulders, hands taped from hours of sandbag training. Jason exhaled hard, said he hadn't seen that picture since the war ended. The fighter nodded, said it was the only one their father ever kept in his wallet. They sat in silence for a while. No need for more words. Eventually Jason stood, offered his hand. The fighter shook it, not tight, not aggressive, just present. Jason said the kid had a good shot at being solid, but he'd need more than pressure. He'd need example. The fighter nodded, said he was trying. Jason left cash on the table, didn't finish his drink. Before he walked out, he stopped near the boy, told him to keep his chin tucked, and to never let people confuse silence with weakness. The kid smiled, confused but proud. Jason stepped out into the dry wind, pulled on his jacket and stared out across the parking lot. He didn't feel embarrassed. He felt instructed, because stepping into a moment without the full truth is still noble, but walking out of it willing to adjust, that's the real fight. He stood by the car for a while, hands in his pockets, not thinking about the mistake, thinking about how fast a legacy can be misread if you only listen to the noise. The man he nearly struck had once been a child running through the same field. Jason slept in between missions. The man had grown, not into a brute, into a shield. Jason had just been too ready to swing to notice. He left without fanfare. No apology speech, no promise to return, just the right kind of silence, the kind that doesn't hide regret, it carries it forward. Jason drove straight through the night. No music, no calls, just the engine humming beneath him and the memory of that boy's face, wide-eyed but calm, stuck in his mind like a faded scar. It wasn't the confrontation that haunted him. It was the realization that he'd stepped into a scene half-written, thinking he knew how it ended. But he hadn't, not even close. The fighter hadn't been looking for attention. He wasn't performing. He was doing the one thing Jason respected more than anything, protecting someone without asking to be seen. And Jason had nearly ruined that. By the time he got home, the sun hadn't risen yet. Just that dull indigo stretch across the sky, the one that always made him feel like the world was still deciding what kind of day it would be. His place was small, off-grid, built for silence, the kind of home where no one knocked unless they were already trusted. He dropped his jacket on the chair by the door, sat on the floor beside the footlocker, and stared at the lock for a moment. It had been years since he opened it. Inside were only 3 things: a worn combat knife, a faded photo of his first fire team, and a sealed envelope he'd never had the courage to read. The name on the front, Matt Rourke, the fighter's father. Jason ran his thumb along the seal. He'd received it after Matt's funeral. Never opened it, told himself it could wait, that he already knew what it would say. But tonight something had shifted, and silence was no longer enough. He broke the seal slowly. The paper inside was yellowed, the ink slightly smeared, written by hand, not typed. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, controlled, like the man himself. It wasn't long, just 4 short paragraphs. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. Don't feel guilt. You did everything right. You always did. I don't have requests. I don't need tributes. I only need one thing from you: stay present. Not in combat, not in control, but in those little human moments where your instinct is to act before you observe. Because one day you'll step into something with good intent, but if you miss the full picture, you'll become the problem you thought you were fixing. Jason read it twice, then a third time. By the end, his hands had stopped shaking. Because the man he'd nearly confronted, the so-called bully at the bar, had turned out to be a reflection of the letter's final line. Matt hadn't been predicting war, he'd been describing fatherhood. Jason sat still for a long time. Eventually, he placed the letter back into the footlocker, closed the lid, and stood. Something in him didn't feel heavy, it felt awake. The next morning, he made one call, a number he hadn't used in over 10 years. Still worked, still went straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a name. Just said that he owed someone a visit. By noon, Jason was in a sporting goods store just outside Reno. He bought one thing, a brand new set of 16 Oz sparring gloves. Not for himself, he had someone in mind. That evening, he pulled back into the same dirt lot outside the bar. No cameras. No speech, just the hum of neon against twilight. He stepped inside, same posture, same black shirt. The boy was there, this time with mitts on. The fighter stood across from him, holding pads, coaching through soft repetition. Jason watched for a while, then walked over slowly. Didn't interrupt, just waited until the round ended. When the fighter looked up, Jason nodded once, held out the gloves, said nothing. The fighter took them, nodded back. That was it, no ceremony, no apology, just presence, and that was enough. Jason didn't stay long. He said he was heading east, something quiet, something long overdue. Before he left, he pulled the kid aside, told him if he ever lost the fire not to fake it, to step off the mat, breathe, and come back when he could not fight, because anything else, that wasn't discipline. That was noise. Back in the car, Jason pulled out a pen, wrote one line on a folded napkin and slid it into the glove box. You can't fix what you don't take time to see. Then he started the engine and drove off. Jason didn't sleep that night, not from guilt. That wasn't it. The emotion sitting in his chest was something older, something that didn't come with names. It came with memories. So instead of sleep, he drove. Miles of highway, no radio. Just the stretch of road eastward toward a place he hadn't been in over a decade. Ridge Rock Garage, a retired auto shop on tribal land, run by the only man left from their original four-man fire team. The man's name was Elias Ward. Jason hadn't spoken to him since 2011. Back then, Elias disappeared, told the team he needed stillness. They understood, sort of. But Jason never reached out again until now, because if Matt Rourke had written that letter to Jason, then Elias was probably carrying something even heavier. The garage looked the same as it did all those years ago, sun-blasted aluminum siding, 2 roll-up bays, no sign, no gate, just a bench by the front office and a single lantern burning low. Jason pulled in slow, cut the engine, waited, then stepped out, didn't knock. He knew Elias already heard the tires on gravel. Elias came out 2 minutes later, same build, thicker beard, older eyes, but those hands still looked like they could crush a wrist in half if they wanted to. They didn't hug, didn't shake, they just sat, 2 men, 2 ghosts. Watching the horizon, try to decide if it was done bleeding orange for the night. Eventually, Jason said Matt's name. Elias nodded, said he'd heard. Jason said he saw Matt's kid, told him the story, short version, the bar, the misunderstanding, the boy, the moment. Elias didn't react much. Just said one thing, that kid was Matt's unfinished business. Jason asked what that meant. Elias finally turned and looked him in the eye, said Matt never wanted his son to be a fighter. He wanted him to be resilient. But there's a difference, Elias said, between teaching a boy how to hold his ground and making sure he doesn't inherit your trauma. Jason listened. Let the wind move. Elias told him that Matt used to write letters to his son even when the boy was still learning to read. Told stories from missions, not the blood, the lessons. One of those letters ended up in Elias's hands after Matt died. Jason asked to see it. Elias stood, walked inside the office, came back 5 minutes later with a box. Inside were 3 things: a folded military patch, a training photo from 2007, and a note on torn notebook paper. Jason read it slowly. If I'm not there to help you get through it, find someone who doesn't talk loud, doesn't swing fast, but knows what it feels like to lose the upper hand and still choose not to kill. Jason folded the paper slowly. That wasn't a quote from some manual. That was Matt, talking about restraint before his son even knew what violence was. And now that same boy was being trained not to strike hard, but to understand what it meant to endure. Jason told Elias about the gloves, the way the kid moved, the focus. Elias nodded. Said it sounded like the boy was becoming what Matt always wanted. Then he added one more thing. He said Jason almost broke it, almost unraveled all of it with one well-intended move. Jason didn't defend himself, didn't shift in his seat, because Elias wasn't accusing. He was just holding up a mirror. Jason let it sit. They talked for another hour about gear, about the others, about what silence felt like after war. Then Jason stood, said he was headed north. Elias asked what for. Jason said he wasn't sure, but whatever it was, it'd be quiet, earned, and probably overdue. Before he left, Elias handed Jason a folded paper with one line scrawled across it. Not everyone who looks dangerous is a threat, and not every threat looks dangerous. Jason slipped it into his pocket, didn't look back. He drove 5 hours to nowhere. Slept in the truck, dreamed about a kid in gloves throwing slow punches under a dim bar light. But in the dream, the kid wasn't training. He was waiting for Jason. Not to fight, to watch, to listen. Have you ever heard someone's full story, only after nearly judging them wrong? Drop your experience in the comments. Sometimes the people we almost confront are the ones quietly holding it all together. 2 weeks later, Jason was chopping firewood behind his cabin when he heard the sound of tires on gravel. Slow, deliberate, not someone lost, someone arriving on purpose. He set the axe down, wiped his hands on his jeans, and stepped toward the tree line where the path curled in from the main road. A small silver sedan pulled up, the engine stopped, and the passenger door opened. It was the kid, Matt Rourke's grandson, the one Jason almost stepped between. The one who stood there that night in the bar with a look that didn't belong to a boy. It belonged to someone trying to carry a father's legacy without fully understanding the weight. He didn't say much at first, just nodded, then held out a small envelope. Jason stepped forward slowly. Took it, no name on the outside, just the word, deliver. The kid said Matt had written a handful of notes before he died, each meant for someone specific. This one had been passed from hand to hand, years after Matt's death, finally making its way through family and friends, and eventually landing with him. The instructions were simple. When the boy turned 18, he was to find Jason and hand it over. Today was his birthday. Jason didn't open it immediately. He invited the kid in. They sat on the back steps of the cabin, overlooking the trees and low hills, a quiet wind moving through the pines. Jason asked if he was still training. The kid said yes, said his brother had stopped being so hard on him lately. Jason asked why. The kid smiled faintly, said because now he didn't flinch when life pushed him. Jason nodded. That was all Matt ever wanted. He opened the letter. The handwriting was rougher than the last one, age, shaking hands, but the message was clear. You made it out. I didn't. That's the truth, but I'm not writing this for closure. I'm writing this because I know you, and I know there's going to come a day when you're going to mistake protection for intervention. You'll mean well. You'll feel the charge. You'll want to act. Don't stand still long enough to read the room, Jason. Not just the posture, not the fists, the whole picture. Because sometimes the thing you think you're saving is already saving someone else. Jason folded the paper slowly, didn't look up for a while. The kid sat beside him, legs swinging off the step, quiet. Then Jason said something low, not really meant for the boy to hear but loud enough that he did. He said Matt was still teaching him, even now. They spent the afternoon splitting wood, didn't talk much, didn't need to. Jason watched how the kid moved, not fast, but not scared. His hands were bruised but steady. His stance was balanced. He wasn't trying to impress, he was just working. At one point Jason corrected his grip, said nothing else. Just adjusted it, then stepped back. The boy took note. Adjusted his posture and kept swinging. Before sunset, the boy stood by his car, hand on the door. Jason walked over, handed him a folded piece of paper from his pocket. Didn't say what it was. The kid drove off. Later that night, when he stopped to refuel, he opened it. One sentence. When you start teaching, don't speak first. Jason sat by the fire that night. No drink, just memory, the bar, the tension, the almost. And then the truth. He realized something as the flames cracked quietly in front of him. He hadn't failed that night. He'd stepped in because that's what he was trained to do. But he'd grown because he stepped out once the full story revealed itself. And that, more than strength, more than reflex, was what made him better. Final scene. Months later, another bar. Another dusty town. Jason walks in, tired, quiet, sits in the back corner. There's a group near the jukebox. Two guys pressuring a third. Words are rising. Tension building. Jason leans forward slightly, watching, measuring, then someone steps in before he can. A young man, calm, straight spine, no shouting. Just presence. Jason squints, recognizes the stance, the hands, the grip. It's the kid, Matt's grandson, stopping a fight without throwing a single blow. Jason leans back in his seat, smiles faintly, doesn't say a word, just watches as someone else carries the lesson forward. Has someone ever taught you something so powerful that years later you passed it on without even realizing it? Tell us your story in the comments, because some lessons aren't spoken, they're lived.